Hi, and welcome to Experience Week. We're excited to have you with us today. The presentation is titled, Getting the Most Out of Your Brand Tracker by Steve Snell of Qualtrics. Before we jump into content, some quick housekeeping items. First, feel free to share this event with your colleagues as it's not too late to register. Second, let others know you're watching by tweeting at Qualtrics with hashtag ExperienceWeek. And third, all content from today is available on demand, so enjoy. The time is now yours, Steve.
Thanks, Phil. Great. I'm really excited to talk about brand trackers today. That's really what I do here at Qualtrics is I work with a lot of our clients on building out and improving their brand tracker studies. And brand trackers are just intimidating to a lot of people. It truly is the case that they're, the king of brand research is the brand tracker, and understanding what goes in a brand tracker and what doesn't. How much can we get away with? All of this. And a lot of people, I think, assume that brand tracking is for big companies, not for them. But truly, anyone can do a brand tracker. There's relatively few principles that make for a successful brand tracker, and that's what I want to walk through today. So the first question is, what are we tracking and why? And this is a really important consideration. Why are we even doing a brand tracker? We want to understand how things about our brand, attitudes, associations, awareness, how they've changed over time, principally. We want to know how things have changed over time. And we want to know how they've changed following or in spite of, perhaps, our marketing activities. Are we seeing a payoff? I've had lots of clients tell me, we've been doing tracking for years and we haven't seen any differences. And I'll say, well, what have you done with your marketing program? And I'll say that they don't have one. They have research without a marketing program, which is a rarity. But still, part of the tracking program is to understand how successful or not your marketing program is. We also want to know how these things are working relative to the competition, especially in times of disturbances in the market. We want to know, are we faring better over time relative to our competitors? And is our marketing moving the needle in a positive way, again, against the competition? There are barriers to tracking, but I think the number one barrier, and the one that most people are familiar with, is there are significant costs associated in tracking. And this is because most trackers, we are using online respondents. We're using respondents that aren't coming from one of our customer lists, but respondents that we're either purchasing from a list or through panels. And whenever we're buying respondents, we're paying per interview. And a robust tracking program is not going to have just a lot of respondents, but a lot of respondents in every wave. And so that makes trackers somewhat expensive. We'll talk about how to get some more bang for our buck out of trackers. But also, we worry sometimes that the information we can get from a tracker can be limited. Trackers are by nature the overview, a high-level understanding of brand health, brand equity, and sometimes we don't have the detail we need to really make those data useful to us. Finally, there's some general difficulties in even knowing what questions should be included in a brand tracker. There are lots of candidates, and we'll go through some today. When it comes to getting the most out of your brand tracker, there are 4 steps that I advocate for. The first, nailing those KPIs. Really asking the core questions that need to be in the tracker, asking them the same way every time. Second is asking about the key drivers. It's not enough to just know about those KPIs, but we want to know what affects those KPIs. Third is the concept of setting it and forgetting it, the old infomercial adage. Here we want to make sure that our tracker is truly the same wave over wave. We can't understand change if we are constantly changing our survey and how it is fielded. Finally, and this is my favorite, add some rotating bonus content. That improves the overall value of our tracker and, frankly, allows the researcher to have a lot more fun. So when it comes to KPIs, I want to warn everyone to not make the usual mistakes. Most trackers are too long. We are in a world where more and more respondents every day are taking surveys on a mobile device. When people are taking a survey on a phone or a tablet, it takes them longer to get through the survey. Your 9-minute survey is probably a 12-minute survey. So if you're writing a 15-minute brand tracker, it could be a 20-minute survey now. We want to keep these surveys as short as possible. A good brand tracker study could reasonably be done in under 10 minutes. Another problem that I see with a lot of brand tracking surveys is that there are a lot of legacy questions that were put on the survey by past stakeholders or maybe stakeholders that no longer use the data. Trackers often represent Frankenstein with parts borrowed from all over the company. That creates a pretty terrible survey experience. And we're asking questions that we need not because we know that no one's actually going to be looking at those data. Finally, a lot of folks err on the side of industry standards rather than what their brand actually needs. That is, we don't want to be terribly judicious about KPIs, so we'll just throw them all in the survey. Again, that contributes to both the survey length and these legacy questions that ought to be retired. All of these things together contribute to a respondent burden. We make it harder for respondents to get through our survey, which means they might take it less seriously or they might quit. All of these things are undesirable. As researchers, what we want to do really is make the survey as friendly as possible for the folks who are taking it. What do we need to do in order to nail the KPIs? The first thing is really to think about what the business, what the brand needs, and tailoring our measures to do so. There are a lot of candidates: awareness, loyalty, past purchase, purchase intent, attitudes, attributes, associations. The list is pretty long. Everything feeds up to brand equity, but we need to think about what our brand tracker is going to do and what we want it for. Now, lots of folks will be using NPS, the Net Promoter Score, and some people will prefer not to use it. There are legitimate reasons to use NPS and lots to not use NPS. But the question is, if not NPS, then what? What are our candidates? But even still, if we prefer to use NPS, what else? We've long acknowledged that the one question may be the preeminent question, but isn't the single standalone question. So what other sorts of KPIs should we use? I would say focus on the key drivers. KPIs alone can only tell us how much, but they can never tell us how. We can't understand why metrics are moving. We can only understand whether or not they are. That's where key drivers come in. Through what paths might we expect the KPIs to actually be affected? Thinking through that process allows us to ask the right kinds of questions. We should draw on other kinds of research as well. This is an area to leverage any customer journey mapping, any qualitative research, and even other quantitative research, including ad hoc studies. What do we expect to be the key drivers of our KPIs? Are we including enough questions that we can understand movement in those measures? By wedding these two things, KPIs with key drivers, it allows us to assess whether or not the relationship between them changes over time. We also want to know if these things might vary by brand. Are there different KPIs driving brand loyalty for different brands? Are there different KPIs driving associations, overall satisfaction, and so forth? The next step is critical. We need to set it and forget it. And the old adage in longitudinal research is, if you want to measure change, you don't change the measures. So there are a few different ways in which we could actually change the measures, even without meaning to. And one is the sample. If we're talking to different kinds of people, or even if the different proportions of segments in the population changes wave over wave, that could induce variation in our KPIs, variation that the key drivers may not be able to pick up. So the first step is really to ensure that the sample looks the same, wave over wave, that we're talking to the same kinds of people, sourced in the same kinds of ways. Second, and this probably goes without saying, but using the same KPIs wave over wave. That refers to question wording, of course, but I think there are other ways that we can actually change the questions without meaning to. One might be an overhaul of the look and feel of the survey, changing the template, changing the display, how the questions look on the page. All of those things, in effect, change the KPIs. Small differences in a survey can lead to big changes in these KPIs over time. And so again, the best practice is to ask these KPIs the same way, wave over wave. Next, we need to make sure that question order is the same as much as possible. KPIs should come in the same place in the survey, wave over wave, and we should ask the same questions before those metrics. If we were to ask different questions, we might reasonably induce some sort of priming effect wherein people will answer the questions, whether it be satisfaction, NPS, anything, differently because we primed them to think about different considerations. The last step of our 4 in getting the best out of our brand tracker study is actually my favorite, adding rotating bonus content. This is the payoff. If we've done a very good job at streamlining our survey, asking only those KPIs that matter most to our stakeholders, trimming the fat, getting rid of those legacy questions, throwing them out, and focusing on key drivers in addition to our KPIs, then you likely have a survey now that is well within a good length, even for a mobile device. If that's the case, give yourself a pat on the back. You actually have room now to ask some fun questions. This is, after all, your target audience. So what else might you want to ask your target audience? You probably have them for another 2 minutes. Now, I want to be sensitive to the fact that I just said we should set it and forget it. An important practice is to not add any rotating content before the KPIs or even the drivers. But this is probably going to be the last block or the last set of questions in the survey. Maybe they come before any closing demographics because demographics are unlikely to change. But we don't want to contaminate any of our metrics that we're tracking over time by adding bonus content. Once we have that out of the way, though, we do have this room to ask bonus content. And you can use it in a few different ways. One is to use that last block for a rotating set of deep dive questions. This is a great way to supplement a tracker. If you want to know about something topical, maybe something in the news, or a shock to the market, this is your ability to ask people those questions. And something very nice about a tracker is you probably know now which of your respondents are your customers and which are your competitors' customers. How are they responding differently to a shock in the market or something along those lines? That deep dive might be useful in wave 3 but not in wave 4. So you can rotate these questions out and put in something new and topical for that wave. You can also use that last block for testing. This is my favorite way to use it. It's a really fun opportunity to find out which message, package, advertisement, whatever you'd like to do, is most appealing to your customers. And maybe even more importantly, what's the most appealing message, package, or advertisement to your competitors' customers? How easily can they be picked off? Is it a matter of pricing? Is it a matter of packaging? What can we do to convert competitor brands, customers, to our own brand? With that, I think everyone's in good shape to go out and build a tracker and feel pretty confident that their tracker's following best practices. Again, the 4 steps: nailing those KPIs. Make sure you're not adding ones that you don't care about because that'll make your survey too long, be annoying for the respondents. But instead have this laser-like precision on the things you care about. Further, building that out with key drivers so you can understand not just the KPIs, but what are the factors that move them. Do they change over the time? Are they different for your brand and competitor brands? Then making sure that you are remembering always to set it and forget it. You want to ensure that all the variation that you see over time in your tracking study is attributable to changes in the market, attributable to changes in your marketing, and not because the question type has changed or the sample looks different. Finally, if we're doing everything else right, there's probably some space at the end of our survey to have some fun. And that's a great opportunity to experiment, do message testing, ad testing, whatever's on the product roadmap. It's an opportunity to look at how people in your target audience would respond to those things in the real world. If you follow these 4 steps, which I really believe are best practices, your tracker program will strike a good balance between some things that trackers usually struggle with. You can balance the concerns of being consistent with the ability to be flexible and respond to changes in the market. You also reach this nice balance between high level, making sure the KPIs are right, and getting the detail of how to move them. And with that, go forth and conquer. Thank you.